but not least, when John Harbaugh took over the New York Giants, there were a lot of questions about him and his future relationship with the GM, Joe Schoen.
Yeah.
And how would it work? Well, Schoen even went as far to say it doesn't matter in terms of who has the power. Well, reports indicate that Schoen he's seen a shrinking role when it comes to power, and Harbaugh is basically handling all the scouting. What's your thoughts on one takeaway I have with the Giants is they've always been a general manager run operation, and the coach ran. It was a big change. There was a story I read this weekend that a big, sticking point for John Harbaugh was I need to go directly to the owner, right? That's who I answer to. I don't answer to the general manager, which makes sense. Here's the thing, though. When Andy Reid went to Kansas City, he said, I don't want anything to do with the players. I want a GM to run that part of it. Harbaugh's always had Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta. I do think sometimes it can get a little out of whack when the coach has too much power.
Yeah.
And let's face it, Joe Schoen hasn't done much to deserve the power. So I understand John Harbaugh going, I want to be the boss. I do think that's when you can make some poor decisions, though, when a head coach, especially a guy 63 years old, he signs a $100 million contract, you can make some decisions that are living more week to week than the big picture decisions that general managers are there to do.
Yeah, I think there's a handful of coaches who are good with personnel. Sean Payton's pretty good with it. He has a system, guys fit in. But they're more often than not, even the very good coaches. I remember when Holmgren was in Seattle, Mike's super smart, great coach.
Yeah.
When he had a lot of power up there, I didn't like his draft picks at all. And they had some guys that missed. It was like, Bill Belichick, college personnel, not good. Last 7 drafts when he was running the whole operation during the draft. Belichick couldn't draft offensive players, skill players. He was brutal. So, yeah. John?
Certainly. While the original discussion may not have been overwhelmingly detailed, I specifically wanted to create a segment focused on the New York Giants. A significant number of viewers, particularly Giants fans, have been requesting more content centered on their team. So this presented an ideal opportunity to address that demand. I have been revisiting this topic frequently in recent discussions because we are witnessing a substantial turnover of coaching staff and general managers across the league. One of the most challenging aspects to gauge from an outsider's perspective is the precise degree of influence a head coach wields over roster construction. This is an area where I consciously and deliberately defer to those with direct connections to the internal dynamics of these organizations. When Colin Cowherd asserts, for instance, that John Harbaugh possesses considerable authority within the Baltimore facility, he is not merely speculating for rhetorical effect. He is articulating a conclusion drawn from conversations with informed insiders who genuinely understand the power structure. Similarly, if he were to suggest that Mike Tomlin lacks significant influence in Pittsburgh, that statement would be grounded in sourced information rather than ping pong ni zhao. These are the types of claims that originate from legitimate sources. As external observers, we can certainly formulate our own opinions, and much of that speculation will inevitably be conjecture. For example, I genuinely do not know the extent of Nick Sirianni's authority within the Philadelphia organization. I can make educated guesses based on available information, and I can analyze various reports circulating in the media, synthesizing that data to form my own conclusions. However, that process is fundamentally different from having direct sourced knowledge. My approach involves aggregating public information and drawing inferences, whereas individuals like Cowherd, in these instances, are relaying intelligence gathered from people inside the building. Regarding John Middlecoff's commentary about the potential pitfalls of a coach accumulating excessive power, I want to address that directly. I am a steadfast believer in the principle that spreading oneself too thin is inherently problematic. Human capacity is finite. You can only achieve excellence in a limited number of domains. This is not merely an opinion, but an empirical reality. This fundamental truth explains why corporate structures are designed with distinct leadership roles. Organizations have chief financial officers, chief operating officers, presidents, and vice presidents. I am referencing corporate governance here, not political structures, to be absolutely clear. This hierarchical specialization exists because managing every facet of a complex operation single-handedly is impractical. Effective leadership fundamentally requires knowing when and how to delegate responsibility. It demands the wisdom to recognize situations where you must personally shoulder the burden and circumstances where you must relinquish control and trust others. There are moments when direct intervention is necessary. Reflecting on my own professional experience, I recall departing from a position at a drug and alcohol rehabilitation facility. During my exit conversation, my supervisor asked for feedback on how the organization could improve. My response was candid. He needed to become more involved. I explained that if his genuine aspiration was to elevate the facility's performance and ensure smoother operations, he personally needed to increase his engagement. The reasoning was straightforward. He possessed the talent, the expertise, and the operational knowledge to optimize outcomes. Yet, he was continually delegating critical responsibilities to individuals who lacked adequate training, sufficient experience, or the maturity to handle complex situations. His reaction was a knowing acknowledgement. He was aware of the issue. My point was that his commitment to organizational excellence would be measured by his willingness to either assume more direct responsibility or recruit competent personnel to whom he could confidently delegate. There is no alternative path. Either he accepts a greater share of the operational burden, focusing specifically on areas where his expertise was most valuable, or he builds a team capable of shouldering that load independently. This dynamic translates directly to the NFL context. There is no universally applicable blueprint for success. However, the Harbaugh situation, particularly his statement about answering exclusively to the ownership, resonates with me. I completely understand that perspective. When a head coach reaches a certain level of tenure and accomplishment, the expectation becomes direct access to decision makers. The intermediary step of seeking approval from someone who then consults the owner becomes untenable. The mindset becomes, I do not have time for that bureaucratic layer. Perhaps younger, less established coaches might accept that arrangement, but once you have accumulated 2 decades of experience, reporting to someone with significantly less expertise feels inappropriate unless that individual has genuinely demonstrated their worth. That scenario would be different. However, that is not the current operational reality for the Giants. Consequently, these developments represent, to me, fascinating data points. I am intensely curious about the internal expectations within the Giants organization. What do they genuinely believe they can achieve? I want to be clear. While I respect Harbaugh, I do not categorize him as an elite, transformative, world-class hire. I am not convinced he will fundamentally revolutionize the Giants overnight. What I believe he can provide is stability. I think he can absolutely stabilize the franchise. In many ways, I draw parallels between Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, and even Mike McCarthy, though McCarthy distinguishes himself through his capacity to shape the offensive identity and elevate quarterback performance in ways I do not believe Harbaugh or Tomlin can replicate on their respective sides of the ball. Therefore, I am watching this situation unfold with keen interest. The immediate benefit for the Giants is undoubtedly stabilization. However, the lingering question is whether stabilization will translate into genuine elevation. That is the transformation the Giants desperately seek. If I were making decisions for the New York Giants, my inclination would be to pursue someone like Clint Kubiak. I would prefer taking an aggressive swing on a candidate with that profile. As unconventional as this may sound, if presented with a binary choice between hiring a Harbaugh type or rehiring someone like Brian Daboll, I would lean toward taking another chance on Daboll. My reasoning centers on quarterback development. With Daboll, there is a tangible belief that he can cultivate a young quarterback, maximize their potential, and extract optimal performance. Yes, Daboll made mistakes during his tenure, and I acknowledge that. However, the possibility of correcting those errors while working with a quarterback who possesses genuine potential is an attractive proposition. I am genuinely uncertain about the ultimate outcome, which makes this situation compelling to observe. I am particularly interested in identifying the specific expertise Harbaugh brings to this role. My assessment is that his primary contribution will be organizational structure and discipline. Returning to the delegation discussion, Harbaugh understands how to operate an NFL franchise. He knows how to conduct effective practices. He understands the preparation required to have players ready on game day. He comprehends bye-week management and all associated logistical considerations. He possesses that operational knowledge. However, his ability to elevate performance in critical moments remains questionable. I have observed his teams appear inexplicably flat in playoff contests, which raises concerns. I have also witnessed his teams commit penalties at alarmingly high rates, which is another troubling indicator. The complicating factor is whether Lamar Jackson and the prevailing culture in Baltimore contributed to these issues in ways Harbaugh could not effectively manage. This connects to my previous observation about their eventual separation. I have consistently maintained that Lamar Jackson effectively runs that culture. Jackson exerts greater influence over that team than Harbaugh does, and I do not consider that dynamic healthy. The head coach must possess the predominant authority within the organization. Andy Reid clearly holds more power than any individual player, though that balance may gradually shift as Reid approaches retirement while Patrick Mahomes continues his career. Nevertheless, the head coach requires substantial institutional authority. This is precisely where I believe coaches like Tomlin, Harbaugh, and McCarthy can sometimes find themselves marginalized. Their authority eroded to the point where their ability to implement their vision becomes compromised. That erosion degrades their effectiveness. The Giants situation presents a contrasting scenario where Harbaugh will presumably wield maximum authority and have the decisive voice in organizational decisions. Observing how this power dynamic manifests will be genuinely fascinating. Will his leadership style, unencumbered by competing power centers, produce different results? Only time will reveal the answer. These represent my personal reflections on the matter. I am genuinely eager to hear your perspectives. What are your collective thoughts regarding the New York Giants, the Harbaugh hiring, Joe Schoen's role, and everything unfolding in New York? Please share your opinions in the comments section. I make it a point to read every single response. Whether your viewpoint aligns with mine completely or diverges entirely, either scenario is welcome. Let us engage in substantive discussions. Let us engage in spirited debates. Ultimately, however, let us prioritize enjoying the conversation and the community we are building. If you appreciate this content, please consider subscribing to the channel. We are cultivating an exceptional community here, and I would be genuinely delighted to have you as part of it. My aspiration is to create something we all feel authentically connected to, something we are genuinely enthusiastic about being involved with. I believe we are making substantial progress toward that objective. Additionally, please remember to give this video a thumbs up, as that engagement significantly enhances visibility and algorithmic promotion. Thank you sincerely for your time and attention. I look forward to connecting with you in the next installment.